So good afternoon, everyone. This is a community update. I'm Dr. Sampson, Superintendent of Schools for the Freehold Regional High School District. And I wanted to take some time this afternoon to go through the processes of what we've been working toward to reopen our schools in September, and to go through how we've utilized our school community forum, and hopefully to answer as many questions as possible at this point in time, and understand that there are some things that are not able to be answered at this point in time, but certainly we will continue to work toward that for our community. A few notes. We have a large group, a community forum comprised of students, parents, faculty and staff, administrators, Board of Education members, medical professionals, and municipal officials, mayors, police chiefs as well, involved in coming together to discuss what's happening, but also to pose as many questions as possible, because the district is in the process of developing a FAQ, a frequently asked question sheet, for all of our community members as we look to reopen our schools safely in September. That larger community forum has met twice. The first time on Thursday, June 18th, and the second time on Wednesday, July 15th. So we've had two meetings to date. Had an awful lot of questions posed, which I'll integrate into this update for the larger community. And just a reminder that we are always here and available to answer subsequent questions that anyone may have. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And the first thing that I'll say, given the unknown nature of the COVID-19 panic and, some very, very strident views on both ends of reopening schools, not reopening schools, and what that looks like, I would just ask that everyone take a collective breath and understand that what is happening on July 16th, July 17th may not be what's happening a week from now, may not be happening what's happening 2 weeks from now. We know things will change, and this is an incredibly shifting landscape, and I'm just asking folks to be as patient as possible. There's a lot of people here in the school system that have been working night and day to make sure that we're able to open our schools, and I'll get into a lot of the particulars. But right now, the status, the state of New Jersey is in phase 2. As I record this, we had hoped to be in phase 3 by this time. That has not happened. We will see what the next couple of weeks bring. We know that the Department of Education and the state has released a guiding document titled The Road Back, about 104 pages of some general parameters. I'll discuss that more explicitly as I go forward. And we know that schools have been charged with opening with students in the schoolhouse in some capacity in September. And I'll talk about some of those options as we move forward. Next slide, please. So what has guided us through all of this are three real bases of our commitments. And the first and foremost is obviously health and safety. We know that the community needs to feel safe, parents need to feel safe, faculty and staff need to feel safe, and students need to feel safe to return, and we're working very, very diligently to provide a safe environment for all. And I'll go through a number of the things that we've done thus far, and other things that we're planning to do as we move forward. And then the whole child. We understand that this has been an incredibly disruptive time for our families and for our children. You have the COVID-19 crisis. You have the absence of many normalized structures, school, extracurricular activities, athletics, and the such. And we know this has been an incredibly difficult time for many of our children. You have the racial unrest across the country, which certainly, are opportunities for us to come together around some of the difficulties that are dividing this country as I record this. And we know what that adds up to, though, is the potential for trauma for students, for faculty and staff, and it's been a difficult several months for a number of us. And so we know that any of the plans that we put in place to bring students back to school must first and foremost really focus on the mental health and the emotional well-being of both students and staff. And so we're taking that charge seriously, and I'll get into some of the processes that we're looking at there as well. And then finally, student growth and learning, the teaching and learning that takes place in the schoolhouse. And we know we have a responsibility to make sure that we continue to provide an exemplary education for our children. And that's what we're going to do here in the Freehold Regional High School District. And so I'll get into what we're contemplating at this point in time as we move through the presentation. Next slide, please. So as it relates to health and safety, a number of items have taken place and will take place, and I will go through that in detail right now. So first and foremost, we are looking at our physical structures, and so we're working with engineers to go through all of the ventilation in our buildings and to make sure that all of our rooms are properly ventilated. We've upgraded and sped up the process to change filters and the such as well. We know that the airflow is incredibly important in our buildings, and so we're working through that. We've purchased temperature screeners, large-scale temperature screeners for every physical structure. So there's 2 per each high school, and these temperature screeners can take up to 70 students in a minute. They're very quick. You walk through them, and you can do it through your wrist as you just walk through the awning there of the screeners called Safe Check. And we know that while there are differences of opinion over the effectiveness of temperature screening, we know that having a process that asks parents and guardians at home to verify that a child is symptom-free and fever-free. We know that masking our students as they sit on any bus to the school. And then we know that providing temperature screeners as they're entering the schoolhouse, that's 3 layers of ensuring that a child does not come to school in any capacity with any sort of COVID-like symptoms. We've worked with our local health officials here in Monmouth County, and they've been very clear to us that they will handle all contact tracing. And so in the event of a positive test, we already have plans in place with the Monmouth County health officials to coordinate that contact tracing. And I should add that all of our nurses have been trained through the Johns Hopkins program on contact tracing as well. And that was one of the steps that we took early in the pandemic. A couple non-negotiables. Everyone who is either riding a bus or entering any of our school buildings will be required to wear a mask. We will wear face coverings at all times. That is going to be an expectation of whatever we do in terms of in-person learning. We are working on socially distancing our physical spaces as much as possible and repurposing some of our large instructional areas for other utilizations. And we know that if we put together a schedule that requires masks, we need to rethink that daily schedule and provide mask breaks. And so we're looking to integrate components of social and emotional learning into a structure that allows students to have mask breaks and staff as well. And that involves moving, specific portions of a building at any given time, and perhaps utilizing outdoor spaces, utilizing courtyards, and utilizing the large instructional areas within each building. And that might be an auditorium. It could also be the library media center. It could be a cafeteria and such. We have hand sanitizer stations are being deployed in every single room, in every single building. We have increased our our cleaning cycles, and we are deploying our custodial crew, who's been phenomenal through all this, in ways that maximizes the human capacity during the school day when we'll be in session, to make sure that we are constantly cleaning. We are in the process of upgrading all of our laboratory facilities and our bathrooms to be touch-free. So that involves all sinks, urinals. None of that will require opening turning on a knob or touching anything. It will all be hands-free. And obviously, we're providing our faculty and staff with necessary PPE. There were a number of questions from the community forum around if students will be asked to provide their own masks. They will. The school will certainly have masks available as well. And we have both mask and face shields available for our faculty and staff. And then we're clear on, we've repurposed our nursing rooms to focus as isolation rooms in the event that a child does have, exhibits any COVID-like symptoms, whether that's a fever or the such. And we've been working with our local health officials on what those processes look like. So those will all be very explicit in our return plans. There was a number of questions around quarantining and travel from other states. Certainly, we will be tracking if anyone comes in from any of the states that are on the no travel list. A 14-day quarantine will be required. Certainly, the Freehold Regional High School District will utilize that quarantine. There are provisions for essential employees who may have been traveling from out of state, and we're also utilizing those presently, as we're all in the 12-month employees have returned to the buildings at this point in time. And then obviously following all of the best guidelines for requiring medical clearance to return. So a few of the items that are taking place on health and safety, and we can go to the next slide, please. So what do we definitely know? We know that New Jersey schools are going to reopen for in-person instruction in some capacity in September. And we know that school districts are required to provide their plans to their general public 30 days, 4 weeks actually, prior to the opening of their school year. So a few things that we're doing here in the Freehold Regional High School District. We are, at our next board meeting, altering our school calendar. We will move what was known as a professional development day for faculty and staff. That was a faculty and staff only day where students were not in the building. We will front load our school calendar, and so our schools will start a bit later so that we can provide the adequate training for our faculty and staff. So I'll get into that a little bit further along the presentation. And we know that face coverings will be required no matter what, at all times, and that we will utilize mask breaks throughout the day. We do have the road back, the Restart and Recovery Plan for Education from the state of New Jersey. It is a 104-page document, but it is available online, and we'll put it up on our website for any parent and guardian that wants to take a more detailed look at it. We have engaged in an awful lot of survey data, collecting survey data from our community in order to help guide and inform our plan. I can tell you right now that the parent survey that went out on July 9th, we've had almost 6,000 responses to. So we feel it gives us a very, very good directional on which ways we need to go in order to align with the wishes of the community, of course, within the parameters of following all science and data around safety. And so we'll go to the next slide, please. So some of the, here's a little look at what our parent survey outcomes look like. And so obviously the first preference was for a full day schedule with all students in school, and that was somewhere around 45% as a first or second preference in total from the community. I can say definitively at this point in time, we are not planning to open up with a full day schedule. We will open up with a partial day schedule in September, And the reason for that is managing hallway flow, managing the numbers of students that would traditionally take place during the lunch hours. We were looking at staggering lunches and phasing that in. What we will ultimately do, our plan will have phases to it. When we are able to bring all students back or able to safely maneuver students through lunch, we will gradually expand the school day to a full day. But for the start in September, we are looking at a partial day schedule, which was the second preference from our school and community. And you can see that there, somewhere around 64% of the parents said at least a partial day schedule, all students in school. And then certainly an alternating day schedule. You see there was about 60% of our parents requested something of that nature as a first or second preference. And so what's important about those first three buckets are that it's clear that our parents want students back in the schoolhouse, certainly. The other issue that we have, though, is that we have about 18% of our parents who have requested remote learning, do not want to return to the schoolhouse in September. And the state has not been clear on their guidance on that at this point in time. We've asked. I was part of a county group with I happened to be the president of the Monmouth County Superintendent's Roundtable, and we coordinated with several other counties to write the governor's office directly, to write his assistants, and to write the Department of Education asking for clear guidance on what remote learning looks like for students who choose not to return in September. We certainly don't want to be pitted against a few thousand of our parents who clearly are hesitant to send their children back in September. And we understand that as well, and we continue to work through, and hopefully that guidance is forthcoming. As far as bus transportation, we will utilize, obviously, masking. I've been told that alcohol-based hand sanitizer is prohibited on school buses, but we will work to wipe those buses down between runs and also to provide other wipes that may not be alcohol-based, but certainly will mitigate the spread of any contaminants. And about almost 24% of our parents said that they're not requiring school busing. We'll probably be putting out a waiver opportunity as well, because we know even with children masked, we want to reduce the capacity on those buses as much as possible. It will not be possible to fully socially distance. We simply can't make the bus runs to do that, but we will be requiring students to wear masks at all times if they're utilizing school busing in any capacity. We're looking at a few other possibilities. Depending on parking spaces and the such, we might open it up for more students to drive to school who are able to, but that is very much dependent on the number of parking spaces that we have in our 6 high schools. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So here's what we're looking at in terms of scheduling models as of right now. And I want to preface this by saying this is subject to change. This is a baseline of where we are presently, and we will continue to work through this. As I record this on July 17th, we know that things will change dramatically, potentially, over the next several weeks. But we are looking at opening in a hybrid schedule, which means a partial day in and a partial day out. But one of the philosophical underpinnings that is guiding us in all of this is attempting to ensure that our hybrid model resembles what our full remote model might look like as much as possible. And the reason we're doing that is that we anticipate that there might be, and we've been told to anticipate that there might be short-term closures, that we might move into remote learning on a building-based level potentially, depending on the track that this virus takes as we move forward. And so we have to prepare for that. I will say that we also know that what the instruction looks like remotely in the fall has to be different than what it looked like in the spring. And we understand that in the spring, it was very different. When you're 3/4 of the way through the year, relationships are formed with students. There's a clear consistency in each and every classroom, and teachers know their children. And we pivoted on a dime, and our faculty and staff did a terrific job of that, and I'm proud of the work we did. But as we enter into September, we will be following along a much more synchronous model, and what synchronous means is real time, following the school schedule on that partial day as much as possible. In the spring, we were very much asynchronous, anytime, anywhere. But our parent survey and our students that we surveyed at the end of the school year was overwhelmingly compelling that if we were in some sort of remote or hybrid environment in the fall, that our community wanted us to more closely approximate a regular school day as much as possible. And certainly, the last thing we're going to do is have children sitting in front of screens for hours, but we are going to utilize a schedule that will be much more synchronous and in real time. We are considering serving grab-and-go lunches at that point in time, so folks have perspective as a community. We had about a little over 1,000 students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch, and we don't want to cut those services to those children. And we also know that we loaned down almost 500 Chromebooks in the spring to make sure that our children were connected, had devices, and were connected to the internet. And we worked with local cable providers and had that up and running literally within a week of our schoolhouse doors closing. So we're proud of that work. The partial day schedule in hybrid would look something like a much more synchronous utilization of Google Meets and the such, an A day and a B day. So what we're looking at is an A day and a B day. While A day students are in the schoolhouse, B day students are home. While B day students are in, A day students are home. Splitting that along alphabetical lines, and that puts us at about 50% capacity. But we also know that if we have somewhere around almost 20% of our parents telling us they want remote only and they're going to potentially not send their children back to the schoolhouse, we feel that the full capacity will most likely not be more than about 40% on any given day. And we'll return, back to our handbook approved practices around grading and the such. That would be a partial day. What we're exploring right now, it is certainly not definitive at this point in time, but we have ideas around it. Would be a partial day schedule, students moving through 5 of their block classes for about 50 minutes. Obviously, we have a rotating block schedule here, so you have 2 drop classes that don't meet. In the afternoon, working with our faculty and staff, lunch and providing support and professional development for our faculty and staff, and allowing them on the back end of the day to spend some time working with students that might need extra help and extra assistance. We're also potentially exploring models that might have certain subgroups of our neediest students in the schoolhouse every day. If we have to transition to full remote, we would follow that schedule as well. And so A day, B day would go away in that sense, but everybody would be remote following that partial day schedule of 5 periods on a given day, done by either 12 or 1 o'clock. And then with the remaining 2 hours on the back end as opportunities to support our faculty and staff through all of this, allow them to collaborate and allow them to continue to get the support that they need to make sure that they're most effectively working through this pandemic. And aligning the hybrid with the remote allows us to have as seamless a transition as possible in the event between one to the other. We are presently building out our schedules so that we can scale up if needed to full return. If New Jersey is one of only 3 states in the green presently across the country in terms of COVID cases, or we can scale down if needed, if we need to go to remote. So these are all things that we are looking at now. As we move ahead, we will be pulling in that community forum group another time in August. We'll be adding a Board of Education meeting in the first week in August. And then we'll be working very diligently across that month of August prior to opening to make sure that we ultimately decide which way to pivot. So that's where we stand as of July 17th. If we can move to the next slide. So around the whole child, we know that things like ninth grade transition, which is historically the most difficult transition for students to begin with, that has to look different. And so we're working on a schedule that says, that might allow for multiple days of potentially small groups outside of the ninth graders, working with our faculty and staff in finding ways to connect as quickly as possible in the event that we are remote. We do know that our counseling services need to be ready for all students, and that children are going to come to us with, having had a real disruptive several months, and so we're ironing out our counseling plan presently to increase our contact with students and to make sure that we have the availability as much as possible to continue to help families as well. We did a very effective job of identifying struggling students immediately upon the closure in the spring. So right now we are working with a number of families and students who might have struggled through the pandemic. And we know that ninth grade incoming class of a few thousand students obviously are unknown to us at this point in time. And so we will utilize the same processes that we did to reach out to our struggling students at the start of the pandemic as we will at the start of the school year. And that's building systems that have multiple adults responsible for individual students within the larger school context. So we feel positive about what that looks like in order to support all of our children. And we know that the work that we do with our staff is around how to support the whole child, the social and emotional wellness of not just the children, but our staff as well. And we know that that's incredibly important. And so we're planning appropriately for the fall. Next slide. So as far as it looks like for our professional staff, our faculty and staff, who again, I couldn't be more proud of in the spring as we move into the fall. We will move our professional development day that was scheduled for October 12th to the front of the school calendar, which would be Wednesday, September 9th. And we want to really make sure that we take as much time as possible that does two things. It allows us to work with our faculty and staff and provide them the support they need in this new environment. And it also allows us to push back the reopening of school until September 10th, which allows us more time on the back end to work through our reopening plan to make sure that we are as clear as possible for our school community on what is and what is not going to occur. And then our training of our faculty and staff throughout the school year, and it's already started. It started back in the spring when this all happened, but it's around health and safety, around social and emotional learning, meeting the needs of all members of the school community in this pandemic, and the teaching and learning in the hybrid and remote environment is critical. What platforms to use, how we can support teachers in moving through all that, and our administrative team and our teacher coaches have been an invaluable asset in ensuring that all of that is occurring, and we will be built to provide even more during the 2020-2021 school year for our faculty and staff. Next slide, please. And so a lot of questions around athletics and extracurricular activities. What we know on July 17th is all athletics have been pushed back with the start date of September 14th. As I record this on July 17th, a number of university organizations and teams have canceled their seasons. I'm not sure where this will land in New Jersey ultimately. We have opened up for limited practices effective July 20th. What it looks like for the fall season is unknown at this point in time. We do know that we expect our clubs and activities to be able to run virtually if need be. We understand that a lot of these extracurricular activities, whether it's athletics, whether it's a club, whether it's the band, whether it's theater, are really important to our students, and many times the most important thing to them in their day-to-day. And so we want to provide this as much as possible. We just aren't certain what that looks like presently. So as of now, the fall season has been pushed back, which has allowed us to, at this point in time, push all of our athletics back. And we're working through other things like band and cheer and such, and we'll have updates over the next couple of weeks there. But that's where we stand on July 17th, and we will obviously update our school community as needed as we move forward. A few final items before I conclude. This is an incredibly fluid situation. It's incredibly dynamic. We are utilizing all of the data sources that we can. We had a call, my team and I, last week with Dr. Tomkovich from Center State Hospital, who's been a great resource in all this, just to talk through our plan for an hour plus. Our school physicians are part of our planning process. We're utilizing, obviously, the CDC guidelines in all of this, the American Association of Pediatrics as well, and all that guidance. And we are staying as current as possible in what this all looks like from the science end of it in order to make the most informed decisions possible. I understand as superintendent that there are lots of unresolved issues. You know, our staff survey at this point in time has about 92% of our staff able to return, but that leaves about 8% that have expressed concerns with medical concerns, childcare concerns. Obviously, one of the under the guise of flexibility, having 600 school districts across the state embark upon 600 potentially different school schedules is difficult. I have worked closely with our K-8 superintendents as much as possible to align our plans, although everyone has their own constraints and it's potentially difficult. But we are dialoguing continually in order to share ideas and such as well. And we will come out with what looks like the best opening schedule, balancing those needs with the first priority of ensuring that everyone is safe and we can ensure their health. And as superintendent of schools, I take that incredibly seriously. If we don't feel we can open in a safe manner, we will not, because we won't jeopardize anyone's health in all of this. But presently, we have a working plan in place. We have about 6 weeks from the time I'm recording this to really put the plan together from its nuts and bolts. I will continue to update the community as we move forward. We will continue to intake all of your concerns and thoughts, which we've had hundreds of folks, parents, staff, students reach out to us with ideas, thoughts, concerns. As we develop that FAQ, we're sort of dumping all of that into there in a way that our community can make sense of. But I think most importantly, there are a lot of folks working constantly at this point in time to ensure that we have a safe opening for all. And that's what's guiding us. We will move forward. I will update all continuously throughout this process. I want to thank the school community members for your patience, your support through all of this. We have a wonderful Board of Education as well, who's working hard behind the scenes here with a lot of thoughts and ideas to make sure that we do this as safely as possible. So thank you for your commitment. Thank you for allowing us to work toward serving your children. It is appreciated.